Durango Skeptics and Atheists about 2 weeks ago. So thank you for your coverage and very fair-minded and I think very generous and accurate description. Okay, well, I want to share some ideas with you tonight in a non-dogmatic fashion, although I hope to make my points sharply and offer you something to oppose as well. I plan to talk for not more than 40 minutes so that we'll have enough time for discussion afterwards. So after the talk, I would like to invite comments, questions, responses, and so on. I want that to be a good part of our evening here together, too. I recognize that one of the limitations of this talk is that I don't support the points that I make deeply enough. I'm going to go over a good number of points, and so I'll move along pretty quickly, and you'll notice some abrupt transitions in moving from one thing to another. But that will get the issues out there, and then perhaps we can remedy that deficiency somewhat in the discussion period afterwards if you want to follow up with any of the topics that we've raised. So, that's the plan. Please bear with me as I refer to my notes through this talk pretty constantly. It's not memorized, so I'm going to look at what I wanted to say. And that'll keep me on track moving through it, too. Okay, part one, the misfortune of theism. The main claim I want to make tonight is this. Atheism offers a more worthy path for our lives than theism. The dishonesty of projecting an image of ourselves, that is, God in our image, onto the universe has a multitude of unfortunate consequences. It prompts us to obscure the true nature of the universe, so far as we can know it, and in doing so, it denies us the necessity of exercising essential human capacities. The suppression of these abilities cuts us off from the deepest, though often difficult, fulfillment we can find as humans. You know, I think I'm going to try my glasses. I'm exactly on that point, that transition between needing glasses and not needing glasses. Sometimes it's not clear which is the best. But let me try this. I think I can see. Okay, so the suppression of the abilities that having a false view of the universe entails cuts us off from the deepest, though often difficult, fulfillment we can find as humans. In particular, adopting a false image of the universe violates our powers of reason, our dignity as autonomous, self-guiding moral agents, our responsibility to envision a meaningful, even reverential life on the basis of our own values. In short, theism promotes shallow lives by shortcutting the task of being human in a universe we don't understand and that offers us no answers to our deepest questions. In fact, it may be the greatest gift that theism grants us. That is the necessity to invent meaningful lives from our own resources. That's what atheism asks of us, and that theism pretends to offer answers to questions that would, in fact, satisfy us in a way that I think ultimately we can't claim to find satisfaction. And that failure to get that satisfaction, in fact, challenges us most deeply and demands the most of us and ultimately yields the most fulfilling life for us as humans. That'll be the line that I pursue tonight. Theism, in contrast, is guilty of both failing to motivate us to use certain of our fundamental capacities and also of urging us to misuse others of them. So it'll fail in a couple of important ways. We can do better than this. A life without God invites us to engage and to express our deepest nature. Atheism demands more of us than theism, but it offers commensurate rewards as well. Okay, let me repeat briefly the chain of effects facilitated by theism as an outline of the first part of this talk. The second part will then be a more detailed look at the last couple of links in the chain. So here's the chain. Dishonest projection, leading to a masking of reality, leading to undermining the exercise of our abilities, a confrontation with reality would demand of us, leading to loss of the most satisfying life. And in contrast to that, the greater challenge posed by atheism with its corresponding payoff. Okay, let's think this sequence through carefully. I'm open to challenges and objections to any step in this line of reasoning. And just as we don't want to let the theist get away with poor thinking, so we don't want to let the atheist get away with poor thinking either. Yeah. So, well, that's right, that's what we want. Yeah. Damn. Well, no, that's what a fair presentation would require. It will be important to keep in mind one distinction between the objections to theism that I'll raise. Some of them are logical objections to any form of theism, and so that would cover whatever one's conception of God was, as long as it was a personal conception. I'm taking theism to be the view that God is a person-like being with intentions, plans, consciousness, whether or not that being has the three powers that God is traditionally accorded: omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence. What's crucial to theism, as I'm using the term tonight, is that it involves a personal God. So some of the objections are logical to any forms of theism, and some we might regard as contingent or pragmatic objections. They're just objections to certain conceptions of God or the role that God might play in our lives, but are not essential to theism itself. It does seem to me that most religions that are theistic do invoke God for these contingent purposes, and so, according to my view, fail to engage our deepest capacities to deal with the difficulties of life, and in fact the ignorance that we face in
Name
confronting
some
the
religions that aren't theistic.
Well, what do you think about Buddhism? Buddhism is always hard. Taoism.
Druidism.
Well, Druidism, I certainly don't know a thing about that.
Too bad.
Yeah. Okay, well, so most religions probably are theistic. Since I'm not Marco Rubio running for national office, I can take a drink of water anytime I want. And I just ruin my chances for national office. Okay, first step in the chain, dishonesty. Theism is the pretense that we can know more than we do. Any fair assessment of the various arguments for God's existence would have to grant that they are patently weak. So a committed belief to God represents a genuine cognitive failure. And since I think all reflective theists suspect this at heart, it's fair to say that there's a covert dishonesty in the theist stance. However, it's also fair to say that we don't have conclusive evidence against God's existence either, at least for certain more reasonable conceptions of God. In my view, especially ones that don't attribute to God the three superlative powers: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence. A lesser God remains a real possibility, although almost certainly not a personal being, in my view. At best, I would say that the weight of the evidence favors the atheist side in the controversy. Hence, any claim to knowledge of God's existence, I think, is unwarranted. So, it's now evident that I'm not really defending an atheist position as opposed to an agnostic position. Either one of those, either one that acknowledged we don't have knowledge and no answers to our deepest questions, will count as a position that I think challenges us most deeply and offers the most rewards, finally. Second step, the projection of an image of ourselves onto the universe. It's pretty obvious that we've invented a master figure for the universe by looking in a mirror. What is God's nature? Well, really, it's to be a superhuman. Humans can make things. God can make anything. Humans can know things. God knows everything. Humans act morally. God always acts morally. Humans love certain people. God loves everyone and infinitely. Humans live for 100 years. God lives forever. Well, I think that's not a coincidence. We look at the universe, and what do we see? Ourselves out there. But if we can't see reality, we can't respond to it appropriately. So this distortion of the object of our attention allows us to ignore what a more honest report would demand of us. This is inevitably the effect of theism. Belief in a personal God obscures the other. It hides the depth of what is not us. It relieves us of the duty to see and deal with the reality not of our own invention. Step 3. Only by meeting the challenge posed by an honest assessment of reality do we draw on our deepest human capacities. We will discuss shortly what these capacities are and the ways in which they're undermined by theism and fostered by atheism. So let me proceed right now to the final point in this brief outline. 4. Since the exercise of these capacities constitutes the deepest expression of our nature, their frustration denies our lives their potential for greatest fulfillment. We're more deeply engaged when we grapple with true and important questions, with the right tasks. Atheism affords us this opportunity, and in this sense, it offers a more worthwhile life. These last 2 points are the ones we need to explore in most detail. So let's turn to them, illustrating them with examples. So this is now part 2, theism's negation of human nature. What are our basic human capacities, and how are they truncated by religious belief? We might list the following among our essential human capabilities: the use of reason, the assumption of moral agency, spirituality, rightly understood, the autonomous grounding of value of one's own life, creativity, artistic expression, a rich emotional life, the satisfactions of community, of service to others, pleasure in personal interests, and physical exercise. No doubt there are others as well, but these are more than enough for our purposes. Let's consider in particular the first 4: reason, moral agency, spirituality, and autonomy in valuing. We must ask whether theism enhances or inhibits them, then compare the results with the consequences of atheism. So first human capacity, reason. I mentioned earlier the abuse of reason entailed by a belief in God insofar as it prompts us to neglect the evidence or to misjudge the weight of the evidence for God's existence. That's certainly one of the things that I think theism encourages us to do. But respect for ourselves demands that we face our limits without flinching and try to live up to the implications of those limits. It is an essential part of a responsible life, one expressive of proper self-esteem, that one acknowledge what one has good grounds to believe and what one doesn't. Then trying to live within those bounds becomes our task as conscientious agents. Theism seduces us into exceeding those limits. Not only does it blind us with a false master in the universe, but perhaps more importantly, it trivializes the natural world. Am I talking too fast?
No.
No, okay, good. Thank you. It encourages us to view the universe as a gigantic theme park, a cosmic Disneyland with rides made especially for us. The real offense implicit in this attitude is that it cuts the universe down to human size rather than demanding that we expand to fit a more challenging vision of the natural world. By taming and domesticating the universe, theism diminishes it. rather than according it the profound respect that it deserves. We should refuse to indulge in such wishful thinking. Humans have a powerful tendency to let themselves believe what pleases them. And it's important to note that that can be a psychologically healthy inclination, as when we believe that our friends like us more than they actually do, or that they regard us more highly than we regard them. Those are actually healthy misperceptions to have, so psychologists say. And I believe it. I believe them myself. But sometimes it's not a healthy inclination. Sometimes, as in this case, it merely signals an immaturity in our cognitive development. The theist confronts a dilemma here. On the one hand, the more ultimate reality is imagined to be like us in the image of God, the less the challenge it presents to grow beyond our comfortable conceptual bounds. On the other hand, the less like us the source of the universe is pictured to be, the less reason we have to regard that source as a godlike being fitting the mold of theism. The theist can't have it both ways. Both a familiar person like God, sharing our human values, and at the same time an image of reality that demands the most of us. The challenge to grow, in my view, is the option the theist should prefer, but doing so will entail the loss of God. Atheism fares better on this score. It encourages people to recognize the conflicts between religious belief and our ordinary standards of reason. It demands that we use reason consistently across the full range of our beliefs, not compartmentalize it, reserving a special leniency for speculations about the supernatural. In doing so, atheism keeps us honest. It acknowledges that it's better to live with questions unanswered than badly answered. And it presents us with a universe truly worthy of our reverence. Okay, that's what I have to say about reason and the implications of theism, and then more briefly, atheism in the use of reason. Second human capacity, moral agency. We should seek to be moral without the backing of an external authority. God, promising either reward or punishment or a supernatural guarantee that our choices are correct. Theism again leads us astray, presenting God both as a source of moral law and as providing an extra moral reason to act in accord with that law, that is, our concern for our own hides. These are deep conceptual confusions. First, the fundamental obstacle to taking God's will to be the ground of morality is that abstract truths, such as those expressed, say, in mathematics and in ethics, don't appear to be the kind of thing that can be made true by an agent's choice, no matter how powerful that agent might be. Is it coherent to suppose that God could have made 2 + 2 5 by saying so? Well, it doesn't seem so. And similarly, it doesn't make any more sense to suppose that God could make, for instance, the arbitrary infliction of suffering, pain, good, simply by willing that it be a morally praiseworthy action. So that's a mistake, to think God can play the role of the foundation of morality. Second, the error in supposing that an action has moral worth, if it's done for self-interested reasons, is obvious to anyone. The action might be right, but the motive deprives the agent of any moral credit. So God can provide neither a foundation for morality nor a proper motive for moral action. In contrast, atheism promotes the idea that we ought to strive to live a moral life without expectation of reward. Moral reasons are sufficient justification for moral action. Altruism doesn't need the false gilding of a promised payback in the afterlife, nor does it need the assurance that a powerful being approves of one's actions. In fact, such additions merely dilute the worth of the effort to treat others well simply for their own sake. If God is not the source of moral truth, then what is? Well, here we have to recognize that only our own thinking can provide the basis for our moral values, not God or any authority external to ourselves. This is nicely demonstrated, I think, by the fact that we would have to judge whether a powerful being we encountered in the universe was God or the devil. We couldn't take our values from such a being prior to determining whether the being advanced morally good principles or reprehensible ones. But to do that, we would have to have a standard independent of that offered by this being that we encountered. Consequently, our own judgments of morality and of value in general must be logically prior to our judgment of whether another's standards are correct. We can't simply take values from another being, trusting that that being is in fact morally good. We have to make that judgment first. One last thought in the category of moral agency. I want to propose that theism, not atheism, makes morality unintelligible, so long as we take God to be the standard of moral truth. So, as you know, Dostoevsky attributes to Ivan in The Brothers Karamazov the claim that if God is dead, then everything is permitted. In other words, if there is no God to guarantee it, there is no morality at all. But that gets the case exactly backwards. The truth is that if God is alive, then everything is permitted. If humans don't set the standard of moral rightness, then from our point of view, anything could turn out to be right, even things that we cannot possibly conceive of as good. God, for instance, might order us to sacrifice our sons to him in the name of righteousness. Or he might order us to slaughter peoples in territory that we coveted, or to stone those viewed as sexually promiscuous. And these actions are vicious. They're not morally good. But if God is alive, then anything is permitted, even these things. Third human capacity, spirituality. At a first pass, I think we should understand spirituality as the devotion to and respect for something larger than oneself, something larger even than the good of humanity as a whole. Spirituality is the orientation toward a transcendent good. In this category, let's consider first the objects of devotion offered by theism and atheism, and secondly, one of the practices of religion, prayer. Okay. Theism offers a fantasized object of worship, so far as we can tell. But even if there is a God, it isn't clear why we should make a fetish of her. We don't worship a smarter human more than a less competent one, though we might admire the more capable person's skills more highly than those of the less capable. But worthiness of respect, reverence, lies in the particular kind of value or dignity each thing has, and we generally regard all persons as on par so far as dignity goes. God, as traditionally imagined, is similarly a person, even if a person of greater powers than we possess, but it isn't clear that that difference makes appropriate a greater degree of respect. Now, here, let me suggest something a little bit strange. I don't know what to make of this myself, but I want to throw it out as something to think about. And maybe for me to ask you about in the question period. Philosophers like to play with thought experiments to tease out intuitions of value. So, for instance, we have runaway trolley cars, in San Francisco heading toward visitors down the slope. We have lifeboat cases. Somebody's got to be sacrificed. Who do you choose among the people on the lifeboat? You have cases of distributions of limited medicine and so on. Who do you save when you have to choose between people and so on? Let's consider a drowning example. Suppose a person drowning on your left and one drowning to your right. You can save only one. Who do you choose?
The one on the left.
The one on the left. What a crowd. Fort Lewis College. Second case, suppose it's two people on the left and one to your right. You can only save one, either the pair or the one. Who do you save? Other things equal. Maybe the two, maybe. That's what some moral theories say. I'll leave that to you. Third case, two people on the left, your mom on the right. What do you do? Leave that up to you. I'd say my mom. What do you do?
To the left.
Oh, to the left. Always to the left. No matter what. To the left. Okay. Well, now the crucial case, though. Imagine God drowning on your left, and your family on the right. Who do you save? Well, again, you have to answer that. I'll leave that up to you. I don't know the answer. But I'd be interested, here's the point, I'd be interested to hear your reasons for your choice. It may be that personal dignity is in fact equally distributed across creatures with our type of consciousness, reason, moral sensibility, capacity to love, and so on, and that includes God as well. So the puzzle is, why does God deserve the kind of reverence that theistic traditions accord God? What is it that's special or worthy of greater regard as compared to other creatures with similar or analogous kinds of capacities? Now, God is no doubt deserving of respect, don't doubt that at all, but not necessarily more than our own friends and neighbors. Well, now to return to reality. Somehow the image of God drowning just doesn't make a lot of sense in the first place. Okay. If God doesn't represent a uniquely appropriate object of reverence, then what can atheism offer? Well, there are many good candidates here, and all of them are real. Among them is the physical universe itself, with all its mystery and extremes of scale. The exploration and understanding of the world is worth a lifetime's commitment. There is the domain of reason applied beyond empirical investigation, encompassing far more than any person could comprehend in a lifetime, or that humanity will exhaust in all of its collective efforts. This domain includes the realm of value, the adequate understanding of which presents a profound, even inspiring goal, I think. They're also the products of art, of the creative imagination. All of these are appropriate objects of human devotion. Atheism doesn't deny spirituality, much less the transcendent. It serves up the genuine article. Now let's turn to a spiritual practice, prayer. Is this a component of religious life that ought to raise our respect for theistic tradition? I don't mean prayer intended as solace for oneself. I don't see anything wrong with that. But petitionary prayer, in which one seeks a favorable action on God's part. There is something, frankly, insulting about a God who responds to prayer. If God can't be bothered to help a person in need unless someone begs it as a favor, then God is cold-heartedly callous in her attitude towards suffering. Presumably, God knew perfectly well the full situation ahead of time, knew the person was in desperate need, yet would not have lifted a finger unless someone else cared enough, apparently more than God, to beseech her for a good turn. That is not a conception of God that inspires reverence, I think. But secondly, There's the fact of the inefficacy of prayer. Belief in its power shows disrespect for the very standards of thinking we value in trustworthy people. Not only is there no good evidence for it, there is in fact strong evidence against its efficacy. So a truly caring action would be to get off one's knees and do something actually helpful for the person in need. One suspects that prayer is easy and personally comforting, while real help is hard. Okay, fourth human capacity, making one's life meaningful, or as we might put it, salvation. I'm happy to use those terms. Is God relevant to the value or meaningfulness of our lives? Would God's existence give our lives some special significance? I can't see how, but here are three tries. First try. Suppose we are the creations of God. Does that make God's intentions for us our purpose? No, not automatically. Not any more than our creation of engineered animals makes their purpose, from their point of view, the satisfaction of our aims. A goal becomes one's purpose only when one adopts it for oneself. So no external agent can impose a meaning on one's life. In my view, a life has value in the sense of meaning or purpose only if it's valued by the being living it. Any other worth it has is merely instrumental value to some other being or person. So only we can give our lives any sort of meaning they might possibly have. Second try. Suppose God cared about us, loved us personally and individually. Here we need to ask what God's care adds to the friendships and intimate dependencies we already share with each other. Well, it's good to have powerful friends in high places, but it doesn't add anything essentially different in kind from our present trusting, loving relationships. Any new friend is always a benefit, to be sure, but it could not transform. But God's love couldn't transform one's life from meaninglessness to meaningfulness if an analogous commitment to another person couldn't do the same. So there I want to say God can well be a benefit in one's life, but I don't see how the benefit conferred by a relationship with God can play that special role of giving our lives meaning that our lives wouldn't have or don't already have in terms of our friendships with other human beings with whom we have such relationships. Third try. Would an afterlife give our lives special significance? No. If our lives are not significant now, in virtue of the qualities they already possess, then simply stretching them out longer cannot confer that magic ingredient, right? Well, most of this just seems like common sense, right? I mean, it's true. There's no originality here. It's just saying what seems more or less plainly true. Nothing is crucial by lengthening our existence. In fact, if you're discontent with your life, then a short dissatisfied life is probably better than an infinitely long life, right? That would be worse. On the other hand, if you're fulfilled by your present life, you already have the significance that life can offer. So an afterlife doesn't do any work in making our lives meaningful, I think. So it appears that the appeal to God to make our lives meaningful is largely a diversion from the real source of personally experienced value. If theism tries to locate meaning in God's existence or in her relation to us, then that quest is futile. Atheism places the responsibility for making one's life valuable squarely on one's own shoulders. We must discern what is worthwhile and seek to realize it in our lives. It is one of the tasks we face as humans, and one we must respond to from our own inner resources. Part 3, pointless or pernicious. This is a short ending to the talk. Pointless or pernicious. It turns out then that God isn't needed for anything important in our lives. and constitutes a positive impediment to the proper exercise of certain crucial aspects of our nature. In each of the areas we've considered, reason, moral agency, spirituality, and the significance of our lives, theism has revealed its deficiency, while atheism has offered a superior conception of the real issues and of how to pursue goods in those categories. Atheism engages our best thinking and our deepest nature. The theist may be tempted to respond that many of the criticisms I've urged are ineffective against his brand of theism, because those criticisms were of the contingent kind, aimed at certain assumptions the theist might make, but that are not essential to theism itself. Granted, that's true. But if the theist takes this route in defense of his position, he faces a second dilemma he cannot escape. God is exposed as either pointless or pernicious. If belief in God plays the roles in our lives that I've suggested she has so often been invoked to play in terms of the basis of morality, objective spiritual devotion, meaningfulness of our lives, and so on. If God plays those roles, then, which I grant are optional, then God, I think, is actually a detriment in our lives. God is pernicious. On the other hand, if belief in God is saved from those errors, then God may be of some theoretical interest in a catalog of the contents of the universe, but is essentially pointless to us, a cog disengaged from the mechanism of our lives. If we settle for theism, then, we sell ourselves short. Atheism offers an attractive alternative. Of course, not all versions of atheism espouse the attitudes I've associated with it here, just as not all versions of theism suffer from the liabilities I've outlined. So our conclusion should only be this: in its best form, atheism offers a superior alternative. Atheism teaches us to find fulfillment in a universe in which we don't have answers to any of our fundamental questions. And that's its essential and profound challenge to us. Perhaps the most striking capacity we have is this very one, to face our ignorance and to flourish there. We have the strength, the nobility to recognize that we only plumb our deepest potential when we live with full awareness of the finitude and fallibility of our lives. Atheism invites us to live at this depth. So let's end with this near paradox. It's only a near paradox, but I sort of like it. The failure to get what we wanted, God watching over us, is what we wanted. The achievement of living well without God represents the triumph of our nature. Thanks.
We'll take a few questions for brief Q&A, but before we get into that, handsome though Dugald is, I think you'll all agree that he'll look even better in his new Durango Skeptics and Atheists t-shirt. So what questions do you have for Professor Owen? Sir.
I would characterize myself as an atheist in the form of Richard Dawkins, an angry atheist.
Angry atheist.
Angry atheist. In terms of trying to understand words like that you used on the atheistic side, fulfillment, deeper nature. I don't know what that means. Is that different than existentialism, which says existence precedes essence?
I'm embarrassed that it's quite close to existentialism. Actually, if Will Coe were here, I'd grant that maybe in the long run he wins. He's an existentialist. I came here trained as an analytic philosopher with a certain kind of disregard for existentialism. And it did occur to me that my talk tonight is very centrally in the kind of existentialist tradition. So I think that's right. But isn't this an important difference between the quest in science, which can offer fulfillment, and the quest in religion, which I want to argue maybe doesn't, we can have good reason for our beliefs in science, and we can see when we're making progress and see, where we continue to fail and maintain our ignorance. Whereas theism, I think, presents a sort of false image that we know more than we do, or we're more warranted in beliefs in God than we are.
When you talk about deeper nature, are you talking about human potential in terms of physical capacity, which translates into intellectual capacity or cognition?
Yeah. When I talk about human nature, I mean something that I think we have to discover. We don't get to invent it. We have to discover by experience which kind of lives are most satisfactory to us. So I think we don't know ourselves well. Maybe through our whole lives we don't even know ourselves well. But I think we can try out different lives and see what is most fulfilling. And I think that engaging that ability to live in the face of uncertainty is in fact a deeply fulfilling way to live a life. It feels most challenging in a certain way. We have to rely on ourselves more in a certain way there. But I think that that can be quite satisfying.
How do you get to a sense of morality on the atheistic side?
Yeah, well, that would take a lot of work, and philosophers have thought about that for a long time. I do think that there is a good chance that we can show that morality is justified through reason. A lot of people think that that's impossible, and I would have to grant that nobody has done it successfully so far. But that is the route I would take on that. I do think it can be defended rationally.
You have a question?
Yeah. So you talked a minute ago about science and religion,
Yeah.
and how science can arrive at absolute truths and religion can, or not absolute truths, but you said it could take us further than religion.
Yeah.
I just wanted to start this question by mentioning that those are two different realms, and you and I go back a long ways, and my background is in science, and I love taking philosophy classes with you. And I think that ultimately science addresses the natural world, whereas religion deals with an entirely different world, one that science cannot disprove. Science only deals with the natural. But that relates directly to two statements that you said. You said theism prompts us to disregard the evidence. And you also said that basically atheism fundamentally leaves us with not having any answers to any of the fundamental questions that we face, which to me seems like a wash between the two. But I will go at it this way too. I mean, if theism is simply disregarding the evidence and atheism is the inability to arrive at any conclusions, I don't see where there's any kind of superiority with atheism. But I would say this. I would say this though. Theism prompting us to disregard the evidence, I think, is ad hominem, and I don't think that it's reasonable at all.
I know you don't think that.
I think that
criticism to make.
The best explanation for the beginning of this universe is a non-natural or supernatural
Yeah,
first
you'll have a
cause.
hard time making that argument.
Okay, I'd put it this way. How about you give us a scientifically valid explanation for the beginning of the universe from simply naturalistic causes?
I don't think we have it. I think that's one of those questions that science certainly hasn't answered and very likely will never answer. That's probably one of the questions we have to live with unanswered, and better to acknowledge that it's unanswered than to make up a bad answer.
Now, also though, the characteristics. I think that whenever we see an entire universe, it's easy just to say, let's not try and answer that. But there are good answers for that, and they actually imply everything that you said at the beginning of the talk. We attribute to God: His omniscience, His omnipotence, His omnibenevolence. If there was a first cause, and I think there's good reason to believe there was, then it was obviously omnipotent.
No, it's not obvious at all.
It created
It has
all
any of
matter,
those
so it's
qualities.
superior to all matter and powerful over all matter. Anyway, I won't take too much time. I'll leave it at that. But those
Carry
same
on over a
qualities,
cup
I
of
think,
coffee. Yes.
Yeah.
Nate has worked on me for a long time. It looks as though neither of us is going to budge, but we need examples of invincible ignorance. It's useful to have one side or the other, I'm not sure which it is.
Okay, so
I'm glad to hear you admit there's no beginning.
I want to bring up the notion of unconditional love. And I think a lot of times people look to religion and find solace in some religious notion and prayer and all that, because it's the only way they can provide themselves with unconditional love.
So are they
Which-
providing it to themselves, or are they
I'm simply
imagining
saying,
it?
this is what I've heard people tell me. So how would the atheist approach help people find something like that without a theistic notion?
Do you feel as though people can't love others unconditionally? Do you think humans are not capable of that?
No, I think they are.
I'm
But
inclined to
if
think
you've
they
been
are too.
raised,
So there's
if you've
a
been
source.
raised with really condemning, which a lot of people are there,
Oh.
I'm just simply saying some folks who
Yeah.
have not been raised with unconditional love, that's what might make them
Yes,
turn to religion.
yes. You know, I think that religion provides a lot of good in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, I do too, actually.
I don't think it's
Yeah,
maybe the deepest
yeah.
demand on our abilities or potentials as human, because I think we can do that for ourselves too, or for each other. And there's something really noble and worthwhile in trying to do that.
So when I read theologians, I often, especially when they're talking about moral issues, they often say things like, when people disagree with them, that there's not any honest intellectual mistakes. That they're always, it's not just a matter of confusion, lack of knowledge, lack of insight. There's some moral culpability for the difference in opinion. And I just want to ask you.
So moral culpability on the part of people who don't see God's existence.
Yes.
Well, then I'm guilty.
No, what I'm wondering is if there's, it's not even just the not seeing God's existence, but also disagreement, say like on the abortion issue or a whole range of moral issues.
Yeah.
What I'm really curious about is if there's some set of theistic beliefs such that you have to get to that conclusion, that the disagreement is always grounded not in an honest intellectual mistake, but in some moral failure.
So you're asking, is there a theistic view that promotes that or suggests
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Well, you may well know more than I do about different theological
that's a genuine
viewpoints.
question. I'm curious.
Yeah, well, that is not something that I have studied, certainly. I really am merely a philosopher, wouldn't pretend to be a theologian. I kind of think there's no subject matter there myself. So a degree in theology is a rather odd thing. But you can get one. No, I'm serious. I really just don't know what that viewpoint would be.
Gentleman in the back.
You're obviously not a religious person, and neither am I. And in your little text here that I like, it says, our dignity as autonomous, self-guiding, moral agents. And you talk about, people that don't believe in God as autonomous. Do you think the role of religion is useful for people that aren't autonomous? I'm thinking of slaves in a slave ship coming to the New World. They don't have autonomy, and they have to believe in something, right? So
Yeah, they do
let's
have
believe in
intellectual
God and not
autonomy.
believe in.
So they have the autonomy of the use of reason, their own minds. But in that case, I would not discourage anyone from religious belief.
So you would agree that religious belief is good
For many people.
for many people for a reason?
I think it can provide a kind of fulfillment, a kind of satisfaction in one's life, yeah. Is that what you're asking? So in special circumstances, yes.
Well, but I mean, we're all here, we're all autonomous people, we're at Fort Lewis College, exercising our right to be here. We're a very, small minority of the world.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have our freedom. So what if we don't have freedom? What if we're talking about this in a different place? should a place with less freedom have more religion?
I don't know what the possibilities are for human lives in really difficult circumstances. Maybe religion is, in fact, the best life in some circumstances. It seems to me that's a matter of psychology. It's an empirical question about what kind of lives people can live in situations different from ours. But I think for us, for most of us here, we're very well taken care of.
Let's take one more.
Okay.
You said God cannot be the source of moral truth. Are you implying that there is an objective moral truth?
I'd like to.
Well, where did that come from? It can't be just
It
what
has nothing to do with you personally or me personally, but I think it can be grounded in reason, which I think is a capacity that we share and we exercise well or badly to a different extent. But I do think that morality can, in fact, be justified in terms of norms of correct reasoning. So that's an impersonal, abstract basis for morality.
But you're, you're saying you reason your way to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So it's already there.
Sure, the way mathematical truths are already there, whether anyone has recognized them or not. In fact, most mathematical truths no one has ever thought of.
Okay.
But I take it they're still there and they're objective in some important sense.
So where did that come from?
Reason itself?
No, the morals.
Morality
The
came from reason. Where did reason come from?
No, no.
Wow.
No.
Oh, you want me to trace the path from reason to morality?
No, well, I want to say, if reason is the path to morality, how did morality get there?
How did math truth get there?
That's what I want to know.
Well, I think math is based on reason as well. You know, logic and set theory, that's the traditional analysis of mathematical truth. I think they derive from reason, and I don't know where reason comes from. I'm not sure if that makes sense to answer. Sorry, that's not a very satisfactory answer.
It looks like we have a lot of ground to cover in future lectures. So.
Wait. You're not intending to just close this off now, are you?
No, well, so I'm sure you have many questions. Why don't we just stick around? I mean, Dugald will be here, I'm assuming, for just a bit.
3 hours.
Yeah. We're trying to keep this to 1 hour so people don't feel awkward, leaving and all that. So, very quick last plug. Visit our websites, meetup.com and Durango Free Thinkers, if you want to learn more. We have we're trying to become more active in the community. We've got a highway we've adopted and some other things we're trying to do. So, anyway, please join me in thanking Professor Dugald Owen.
The morality that would be supported by reason.